So as you can see, I decided to go ahead and darken up these columns and the walls. I felt they were a little bit bright, but I felt like this was a good opportunity to give you a way to create different scenes, especially for like the scenic designer if you want to create renderings for multiple looks. So what I did was I took all of the layers that comprised, particularly the columns and the walls, and I essentially duplicated those because I didn't want to go and change all of the work that I had done already, but I wanted to be able to show them with a slightly different look. So I just gathered all of the parts into a group. You right click on it and you can duplicate the entire group. So once I've done that, and if I open up this little file box, you can see I also grouped them by column. I essentially took the original layer, the original texture layer here, and used my levels to darken that up. And then in order to get that fade to go darker, I just copied it and made two copies of it. So if I just have one version of that fade here, it's just not quite dark enough now that the whole thing is darker. So adding that second layer darkens it up even more. So I did that on all of those platforms. And if I have all of these little files collapsed here, I can just simply turn those off and I'm right back to my nice bright column. So maybe you wanted to show or would want to show sort of a daytime look. So maybe that background image could change to something like more of a bright blue. It would make more sense. And then you have a whole completely different scene in here. So for this one, for this demonstration, I'm going to keep it in the dark mode. We'll just turn the regular versions off, although you can't see them because they are underneath these other layers that are visible. But you know, it's very easy to change up the scenes, and you don't have to do any kind of permanent change by making. When you make copies, you can keep your original in there and just work from that. All right, so last thing we need to do is add some figures in there and add some lighting effects. So I've gone through and I found these this lovely picture. This is actually from a play called Shakespeare in Love. We did it at Florida State University. And I picked out three figures and I've already separated them, different selection tools and whatnot in order to pull them out. So I've got that guy, that girl, and the queen, of course. So I'm just going to drag this out. I'm not sure how these are gonna, how big they're gonna be or small they're gonna be, how they're gonna fit. He's very big, and he also is back behind everything. So let's put him in front. So clearly we're going to need, need to scale that. And I accidentally stuck him in that folder. So if that ever happens, just got to go grab it and pull it out of the folder. Be careful as you're moving things around with folders because they do like to embed easily. So if I hit Command T, that brings up my transform tool. I can scale him down, make him look a little more appropriately sized for this scene. Looks reasonably good, I suppose. And change my layer. I'll drag the queen in. Maybe she's going to be up on the platform here. She'll be a bit smaller if she is further upstage. So these are 10-inch steps that I created in Vectorworks, so that's maybe a little small. To a certain extent, you just have to kind of give your best guess, make it look as appropriate as you can. And kind of compare him, since she's a little smaller than him, although he was kind of a little guy, so you know. All right. And they look pretty good. I might want to affect their coloring just a little bit if I go in. Let's just see. I go to match color. What color would I want to try to match? I have a feeling this isn't going to work very well, but we're going to try it. So I'm going to just turn those lines off. And this is a good demonstration of why we did all that expanding in the beginning. So I see if I have that turned on, I can see all the outlines, but it looks a little bit nicer without it, doesn't it? And if I hadn't have done that selection expansion, then all of those little spaces would just be white lines. So I think the coloring is better, but she's just a little faded. Let's try that with this time I had her match this layer because she's a little bit cleaner. Try the same adjustment. So depending on the images that you choose, you can pick any images you like. You may find this unnecessary, but it's also pretty easy to go in and adjust those. I don't want to spend all night trying to figure that out, but you can get the idea. And now it kind of just looks like they're floating in space, so we need to create some shadows for them. So in order to do that, I'm just going to duplicate each of their layer, Command J, and this layer is going to become our shadow here. So to do that, I'm just going to change the levels. So I'm going to go the levels. I'm just going to make it slide that all the way to the dark side, and slide him underneath his visage there, and then use the transform tool. Just got to figure out which is the right one to use. Let's try distort. Which way do we want his shadow to fall? And at this point, you just kind of have to work the shadow around and have it make sense, width-wise, size-wise, direction. Make sure it stays connected to his feet. That becomes an important blending mode and our opacity, just so it's not quite so dark and obnoxious. And I just layered that on, or selected that part that was overhanging and deleted it from that level. And we'll do something similar here with our Queen and our Juliet. So cast shadows are always going to make things feel more grounded. And if you wanted to get really particular, we could start adding cast shadows for all these other things. But I think it's enough for the figures to feel grounded. Next step is to add in some beams of light to make it look as though we are actually lighting this. Maybe there's a little bit of haze in the air and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and group these together, call them the figures, and I'm going to create a new layer. And we'll call this Light Beam 1. Alright, so with this, I'm just going to use my polygonal lasso tool, and I'm going to create you know, the sort of the shape of a light. And we're going to make it sort of look like it's coming from a light that is out of view up here and probably shining all the way over onto her because her shadow's going that way, so it would make sense for her light source to be coming this direction. So I'm just going to kind of loosely make a selection around her, bring it back up, close it off here. Now, this is not going to work really great because it's going to leave a really hard edge, and I want to soften that up. So first thing I want to go do is go in and modify the edge and feather it. And we'll try 20 pixels. It might not be enough, but we shall see. And you can kind of see how it's automatically cut off where I was outside of my border, but that's okay. And from here, I'm going to pick a color, maybe a nice kind of ambery color, and we're going to fill that. And I don't think I feathered it quite as much, so I'm going to, quite enough. So I'm going to go back and I'm just going to feather it 40. So it's a total of 60 pixels has been feathered now. And if I go to fill, it looks like it might be better. Okay, so obviously we don't want this solid opaque light on her, so we're going to find a blending mode that might make sense. Screen is usually fairly useful. And then I'm going to lighten it up, or lighten the opacity by a pretty good amount here. And then we'll deselect and see how that looks. So it looks a little unnatural. It's not going to necessarily light up all of, you know, this perfect thing. You know, usually haze kind of hangs up above. I'm going to use the quick mask tool to create a gradient selection that will allow me to fade that light up in a more naturalistic way. So I'm going to hit the Q. I'll make sure I'm in my gradient, my linear gradient here. And now I just have to kind of follow that edge. I went the wrong way. I'm going to go this way. Because where it's red, I want to keep where it is not. That should fade it away. So you can see my selection is over here. So if I just hit delete and then deselect, that looks a lot better. So I've got this nice beam of light coming across. It's shaped towards our young ingenue, and her shadow is making some sense. And so now we just need to do similar effects for these other two. So make a new layer. And then we need something for our queen here. This is a light that's coming from more from the front, perhaps. Let's try something. I'm going to try to make a copy of this beam and then use some of my transform tools to give us a little bit different position. That wasn't the right direction. So that was fairly easy. I didn't have to recreate my selection. And if I want that to be a different color, I should be able to just go into my hue saturation colors and work out a different color for that. Now I am finding the queen to be a little washed out, so it might be worth bringing our figures up in front of that. That way we get a nice glow sort of around them, And in theory, they're lit up by those beams, but because they're in front of the beams, the physical pixels of them, anyways, is in front, it will read a little bit better.